Welcome to Faxx, the podcast where we keep it real, raw, and all we do is get to the facts. My name is Christopher C. Avent, and this podcast goes over men's experiences. No cap, no opinions, no even thoughts. I just want your pure experiences. Every show we will put together a diverse panel from baby boomer all the way down to Gen Z and everything in between to discuss the facts. Let me introduce my guest for the day. We'll start from the far end. What's your name and your age, please?
I'm Ken, and I'm 33.
Okay.
34 this month, next month.
I'm Sean, and I'm 19.
I'm Douglas, and I'm 61.
I'm Philip, and I'm 60.
All right, there it is. There's a panel. So we got everyone from Millennial, Gen Z, Baby Boomer, Gen X. All right, today's topic will be men's mental health. This will be kicking off for June for Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I figured this was the perfect topic to kick Faxx off with. So I will defer to my man Phil as our resident expert on this topic. Phil, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
So I am a PhD in clinical mental health counseling. I work in the area of men who deal with issues related to anger, anxiety, schizophrenia, things like that, helping them to find a course so they can start discussing what they've been going through so that it doesn't continue to be a burden. It continues to lift them. And I believe that mental health is something that in our community and men in general struggle with, and it's a big part of the challenges that we have in our relationships and in our careers.
Okay. The first thing I want to talk about are the stereotypes that go with men in general.
Correct.
And I want you to list some of the stereotypes, and then I want to go around the panel and hear everybody's personal experiences with some of these stereotypes.
So the biggest one that I really run into all the time, especially with relating to men, is that men are supposed to be able to thug things out. That acknowledging that there's any mental health issues is a sign of weakness. And I, too, would like to hear what the gentlemen feel as far as their mental health or a man's mental health, and does that indicate there's weakness?
Okay. I'm going to start with Ken.
Yeah.
What do you do for a living, Ken?
So I'm an iron worker by day. I'm an author, a musician, and I run 2 tech companies.
Okay. What has been your experiences with some of these stereotypes about men, what you say, thugging it out, walking it off?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a part of nature, you know. If you look at all the other animals, like the masculinity part of it is there, like especially with lions. Like, you know, if you show any sign of weakness, then they kick you out of the lead role.
Right.
And you got to take the back seat. So, you know, I think it's just nature. But do I think that it matters? I don't. You know, like you could definitely, like, you know, express whatever you need to express as a man if you need to. You know, you shouldn't even be worried about what other people think.
Okay.
That's me.
Okay. Occupation? What do you do, sir?
I'm an electrician, so I'm a tradesman as well.
Okay. What's been your experience with men not coping necessarily with their issues and falling into the stereotype?
Well, that's something I done seen my whole life. You know, I've been around a lot of different types of men. You've been around men that, you know, don't really know how to handle their emotions too well, didn't grow up with that type of expression. So, you know, they hold it against you. You know, they hold it against you, or, you know, they take their anger out in different ways when they just really just trying to express themselves. And I often find that just being able to express yourself as a man, I feel like that's really one of the most important things, because we as men really hold stuff in, and that's how a lot of stuff gets started. Like, that's how a lot of negativity happens, because we don't express what's wrong with us. So we just wait, and then we just blow up eventually, and then we suffer from those consequences. So.
Okay. All right. Doug?
I've seen firsthand what stress and anxiety, mental challenges could do.
What stereotypes have you seen manifest?
I lost an older brother because of stress, and not being able to express a whole lot of things that were bothering him. And I think society plays a large role with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, oftentimes you know, as little boys, I mean, you fall, you know, get up, you all right, ain't nothing wrong with you,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. And
Throw some dirt on it.
Yeah, so society as a whole, you know, oftentimes your environment, and it is a scenario where you're looked at as being weak if you express yourself.
Right. If you can't walk it off,
Right.
you're weak.
But in my opinion, it shows more strength when you can, you know, express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something we have to, you know, especially with folks that we may mentor. Like me, I got 4 sons,
Right.
and I've always told them it's you know, if you feeling a certain way, open up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't keep it held in. So
Okay. Back to you, Phil. So what do you have to say about these experiences?
Well, I think also having been in the military is a great example, because I think you've been exposed to a lot of different things where people were pretty much forced to keep it to themselves a lot. So you could see firsthand on a day-to-day basis what happens when you're forced to suppress your feelings and how you're feeling emotionally. But I'm wondering how the gentleman, one of the other stigmas that I see out there a lot is that in a relationship, in their personal relationships, their intimate relationships, the women struggle when the men have mental health concerns and issues, because they tend not to be able to see them as being strong or providers. And that is another reason that men tend to hide how they're feeling, especially from that person that would be closest to them, that should be able to see what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
but may not themselves be able to receive it, because they look at these men as whom they've attached themselves to as to survive. So how do they feel in their intimate relationships? Do they feel that they can tell their partners, if they have one or have had them in the past, if they're going through something with their mental health?
Right. So it seems very important that you have to be able to confide in your other half at home, because otherwise you're going through stress in the street.
Right.
Come home, now you got to hide it all. When can you be honest?
Well, we wear masks and we put them on at birth. So, and we don't put the first one on. Whoever it is that is our caregiver slaps the first mask on, and it doesn't fit. We just wear it. So we struggle through life with this mask on, where we think everybody knows we're okay. They think everything is great, but under that mask, you're so uncomfortable. You're burned out. You're stressed out. You don't like yourself. Your self-esteem is low. But you keep going and you keep pushing. You keep wearing this mask as tight as it gets, and it's beginning to suffocate you. So when you talk about who can you share it with, if you're in that much discomfort and you can't share it with the person, let's say that you share the bed with, that is a very difficult life that you're living. And sooner or later, it's like you're putting all your socks into the drawer. Soon the drawer is so full that it won't close. Stuff just starts popping out.
Yeah.
Fights, excessive drinking, excessive womanizing, excessive gambling, all kinds of excess, because you're trying to find something to help you get some relief, and you don't have anybody to turn to.
How important? I'm gonna come back to you, Ken. How important is it to to have your boys that you can talk to and be a little vulnerable and maybe not take your mask all the way off,
Right.
but at least expose enough of it and get some support from your friends?
I always had a strong support system, so it's like, I guess in a way, like without it, it'd be terrible. So, I got no problem with like sharing any thoughts, anything like that with anyone like in my circle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that's like it's definitely something that you should have if you have it, and get it if you don't.
Right. But that support system is
Yeah.
crucial to you to keeping your sanity.
You know what? I would say it play a role, but it's like more so a battle with myself, because it's like, end of the day, like without my parents, like everybody else in the world is a stranger.
Okay.
So like when they pass, I'm gonna be here with my siblings. So it's like, like those are going to be the only people that I know. Those people are my friends. So if I have friends, a lot of friends ain't really solid. So it's like, you can't really call everybody your friend because everybody ain't your friend. So like in this situation though, I would think just like talking to yourself, and kind of like not lying to yourself about things, like would help more than talking to someone else and, trying to like see what they're thinking, like you need to understand where you're thinking, what's in your subconscious,
What importance do you have you experienced having a friend to talk to help you cope with some things?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say more so recently. So I had dealt with a really, really bad circle, growing up. Just everybody around me, around my school and everything, everybody was just really toxic. They was just more so focused on hurting each other and just not really just wanting to uplift each other. So, when I graduated high school not so long ago, I cut everybody off really, and I rebuilt my circle with more like-minded people around me. So, like I said, I'm an electrician, so I built my circle around, young, black electricians who I can be, kind of close with, and we going through the same thing right now.
That's a shady group.
So I actually had to rebuild my circle from the ground up. So
okay, but that's important because, and I see the difference. You had a strong family structure. I'm assuming your family wasn't that strong.
Nah.
So you had to build your family.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, same thing with me. I had to build mine.
You definitely got to build your family, and that also comes with certain things as well, because I feel like oftentimes like sometimes you kind of blinded by what you want so bad that you don't see the wolf in sheep's clothing. So what I mean by that is, this gentleman spoke earlier about like, especially like with women, right? Sometimes it's like you want somebody to talk to. You want somebody that you can take that mask off with and just show the ugly side that you're going through. So it's like sometimes you try to latch on to the wrong people, and that can also worsen your mental health as well. Because now, like, you got this person pouring negativity into you, and you are already trying to deal with your negative mindset. So it just creates a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. So I would also say that.
That's a crucial thing that you said, Ken. I truly see the world. Your parents are the only people that are going to love you unconditionally in this world. So if you never get that, there's a void, there's a hole that you're looking for. Doug, the importance of having good friends to talk to outside of family. Well, first of all, you grew up in a 2-parent household.
Yeah.
Okay. Even having that, what has been your experience with the importance of having your boys that you can talk to?
I think I feel it's extremely important. I don't have a whole lot of friends. I don't have a whole lot of associates. My circle is real small. There's probably 3 individuals I call friends.
But you know a lot of people, but there's only a small...
Right. I find that a lot of times folks, if they're in a bad place, they'll pull you down there with them. And if you're already going through some challenges, it just makes it all that worse. Fortunately for me, I have a real good relationship with my siblings. And I can honestly say I probably have 3 people I can call friends. And I can reach out to them at any time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they make you come on their podcast.
Yeah. So, and I'm extremely comfortable, sharing with them, whatever's bothering me.
Space to be vulnerable. Do you see it's easier, or is it different being vulnerable around family versus friends?
What's funny? I'm probably more vulnerable with my friends than my siblings. In my family, it was 6 of us, 6 boys. Not 6, 9 of us, 6 boys, 3 girls. My dad was, I forgot what generation they call him, but my dad was born in 1928.
Is that the silent generation?
Silent generation. Yeah. And the way he raised his sons, I mean, just
hardcore.
And one of the reasons why I'm not as vulnerable with my brothers is because of where my father raised us. And, particularly like if let's say hypothetically, if I had some issues with my spouse, I know my brothers would be, they're like so protective of me, they would be super critical of her. So I don't think I would get that balance that, that I need with, something that's bothering me mentally.
Like a neutral opinion.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let me. Between your friends and your siblings, do you see it? What's the difference in that dynamic? Is it kind of the same as this?
I'm adopted, so it's like, I'm adopted into the family, but like, it ain't my mom or my dad, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I look at people differently, than most people would in a traditional household. Like, my mom raised me, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I think as far as the friends, like my friends, I feel like, like they mean more almost. Like at least like I could talk to them a lot more freely than I can with my parents.
Because they have chosen you. You're not stuck with them like family.
Right. Like some people just vibe on a certain frequency. Like my mom, like we used to always bump heads. My dad, I got along with my dad very well, but he was always working. They were both iron workers. Okay. So like my mom, she was retired in the '90s, and my dad, he's still an iron worker today. But I ain't really like. I learned everything from being outside. Like it was crazy. Like, to be honest with you, it's
the
crazy.
importance of friends. So Phil, in your practice, have you noticed that people that have good friendships, regardless of their home life, do better at coping with their issues that they run into?
The gentlemen that I've worked with who allow themselves to have friends, because you have to give yourself permission to have a friend, because that's a whole nother issue about being too vulnerable with people in general. There's nothing wrong with getting rid of people, places, and things. I agree with you. You say you have 3 friends. I might have 2, and then you get to this age also, a preparation for, in my generation, is my mother has already passed, but I have to get ready for my father passing. So when you start talking about, who are you really close, and I'm an only child, who are you really closest to? So it's just me and my father, really.
Okay.
So part of my mindset is, who will replace that back and forth? Even him calling and yelling, who's going to replace the back and forth that, to me, is a friend now. At 60, even though he's 83, yes, he's my father, but our relationship is far more friendly than it had ever been when I was growing up. And I just think a lot of what I'm seeing in my practice is men are becoming aware that the narrative needs to change.
Specifically regarding
that it's okay to talk to your friends about what's going on.
Really,
it's okay to see a therapist. That's not just a luxury for a white person.
Right.
So you've got a lot of things that are starting to happen because people in my generation and probably 10 years younger really don't have anybody to talk to. I would truly have to go to a therapist anyway because I don't have anybody that I could talk to. There's certain things I'm not going to tell my father because I'm not going to have him burdened with it at 83. I have cousins that I'm extremely close to, but the concept of the blabbermouth exists. So some of the things that I would tell them, I wouldn't be completely confident that they would remain that way. And the couple of friends or 4 friends that I have, by the time we're talking 55 to 65, they've already got so much crap going on that there's only so much they can host.
Okay.
So it's kind of when you talk about what am I noticing, what I'm really noticing is men want to talk, but the struggle is finding someone who's capable of listening.
Where you can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But, in my experience, I guess I'm lucky. I mean, I probably have 4 or 5 friends, but they're all 20, 30 years of friendship. But one thing that I find is when we get together, they may express something to me, being vulnerable. I may be vulnerable with them, but when we walk away, we're all better for it. It's a burden that's been lifted. Yeah. You can just talk to people who chose you, right? They're not with you for any other reason other than they're genuinely concerned for you. And the fact that you have so many similarities, you can bounce things off of them, and they truly can understand you the way that no one else can.
And not to interrupt you, but your friends, that family it's crafted. You've
Yes.
curated it.
Yep,
I
built
mean,
it.
these are people that's why it's such a small group, because there's only so many people that you're going to find that are truly round pegs that'll fit in a round hole. So it's the family that you're born into. You love them because you're supposed to, but that doesn't mean your ideals are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the friends that you generally have that you can get along with, that you can talk to, that you can sit in spaces with and not say anything, those are relationships that over time, like you said, 20, 30 years, you've watched them, those relationships have been nurtured, and you've had a chance to choose whether or not to stay with them. And that makes it just that much more special.
Yeah. Time tested.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go over the dynamic of depression and how men handle it versus how women handle it.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had you were closer to your dad than your mom.
Right.
Doug, I know you're very close to your mother. What, either one of you jump in and go first.
Right.
But what's the differences that you've experienced with your mom going through stress, or women in your life that go through stress versus you or the men in your life that go through stress? What's the difference in how they handle it?
Like the difference between how my mom handles it.
Your mom, or your experience with women in general, starting from your mom to
Yeah.
relationships that you have, how do they deal with stress versus how you see men deal with stress?
Okay. I think I get what you're saying. So, like, my dad kind of, like, was always easy going. Like, it was just, like, he had the paper. So, it was like, hey,
Okay.
whatever the problem
handle
is,
it.
yeah, it's probably a money situation.
Right.
So, he would just take care of the problem. And, like, I didn't live with him. Like, he probably stayed with me probably, I don't know, like, maybe 2 months out of my life, something like that.
Okay.
Like, I found out where he lived for the first time, like, since I was 30. I was 30, like, I found out where he lived, you know. Like, I never knew, but I never cared, you know. So
He
it's
did what he's
just
supposed to
weird.
do.
Huh?
He was doing what he's supposed to do.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
weren't
yeah,
worried
yeah,
about
yeah.
it,
He
right?
was always there, you know. So it's like it wasn't never really a problem with that. And again, like, I'm adopted, so it's not really even my dad, you know.
Right, right.
So it's like,
But you felt that he was there for you?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Like for sure. You know what I'm saying? So like I respect that. And then my mom is actually my aunt, so it's like it's a mix, man. Like the way I deal with depression though is a lot different. If that's like a part of the question.
Yeah. Your experience,
Yeah.
how men or yourself deals
Yeah.
with it versus observing how a woman deals with it. You know, stressed out, freaking out, emotional.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah, for sure. That's always the thing. Like, but like my depression, like I probably just try to teach myself, man. Like it's something that I don't know. You know, like if I'm depressed, I feel like when I was down, rather, you know, I was broke. So it's like that was the last time I was really depressed. I was broke. It was before I was iron working.
Okay.
So it's like you know, you just kind of like start to understand like who's really there and who's not really there, like who your friends, who ain't your friends, and like I just start teaching myself things, like because I love doing that. So you know, I don't really watch TV. I just be like just trying to think my way out of the situation.
Okay.
You know, whatever situation I'm in,
So
just trying
emotional
to
is
think.
the last thing you're going to be.
You know what, man? Like I in private, you know, I probably get a little irritated, but like you know, I just try to focus on the solution. So
Right.
like you know, like because crying don't work. You know,
Right.
Like,
And being a tradesman, right? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
what's the solution?
yeah,
No time
yeah.
to cry about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like just
Yeah.
think your way out of it. So like that's my mom would always tell me that. Like, you know, just think. Like find your way out before you get in.
Right.
Think. And that's just her being an iron worker. You know, like you don't never
Right.
want to go in a space that you don't understand. Hey, there's danger here, danger there,
Mhm.
and then just not know how to get out because you went in blind. You know.
Okay.
So it's like that. You know, just trying to find my way back out of it. And in terms of love, like you know, I don't ever want to be like in love ever again. You know what I'm saying? Because like that was a trap to me. You know, like it was a real trap. And it's just, you know, like you know, it just seemed like it's a fairy tale. My mom would always say, "Don't be living in La La Land." You know what I'm saying? So it's like I ain't never get that until like that particular situation happened.
Right.
It's like, man, this is La La Land. I need to get out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, yeah, that's my answer, I guess.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. What's been your feminine response to stress versus masculine response to stress? What's been your experience?
Well, I feel like I have a pretty good example of both. You know, just watching my mother and my stepdad, and you know, other men and women around me. So I feel like what I've seen regarding the feminine, reaction to stress, I've seen like, it's a lot more of an emotional response. Like it's a lot more like kind of freak out a little bit. I've seen just in my experience, not to say this everybody, but it's just in my experience, I've seen more of a freak out kind of reaction, and I've seen it that stress kind of put more so on the men as well. So it's like now the man has to deal with his own stress and the woman's stress at the same time. And I've seen the men kind of like suffer in silence, really, just suffer in silence because now you have to deal with, let's just say, it's a bill situation, right? Now you got to deal with, your understanding that the bill's not being paid, but also somebody else coming at you that the bill's not being paid. So now it's like, and now you got to, like you said, now it's really no time to cry because now you don't even have a time to yourself. So I feel like that's how I've seen it. And I feel like that's not really a healthy way of how it should be. So that was just my experiences.
Right.
You mentioned, I guess, the feminine or the female side of things and stress. And I was, as the different brothers was talking, I thought back to my mom and dad and how my mom would deal with stress. Oftentimes, she would just stay busy. I knew she was stressed out, but she cleaning up, just staying busy. I know my father was stressed, but he never showed it. But I knew something was,
there's a lot going on.
But he was
power through it.
Yeah, and it's pros and cons to that because me and my brothers, we watched that. We knew something was bothering him, but he never flinched. And that kind of like cascaded down to us. We're all men now, and we kind of do the same thing. And I know there's been a couple of times I've been in a very dark place, stress-wise. And luckily, I mentioned the 3 friends I got. I was able to reach out to one of them. But I think it's, with females, I think it's a lot, I ain't going to say easier for them to deal with stress because, they're emotional and they typically got a band of women that they could vent to. I don't think as men we always have that.
No, it's not there.
Right.
So
You think it's embraced more when women express themselves and let loose, but if a man does it, it's looked at a little differently.
Right. Because matter of fact, I was telling my wife, for me personally, one of the most distressing and I guess emotionally painful things to watch is a man break down. Because he's at that point where if he's balling, he's been pushed to the edge. Because society-wise, you've been taught that you got to be firm, you got to be strong. And I was telling her, I said, I've seen brothers just lose, balling, snotty nose, the whole 9. So yeah.
Phil, well, no, go ahead and piggyback off of that. What?
Well,
your experience and the differences.
My experience is it depends on the relationship. So some women have been conditioned through either the relationships before them, their mother, their father, the lack thereof, on how a situation is to be handled. So if you have a woman that has lived her whole life in an estrogen-driven environment where there's never been any sense of strength other than the woman who's been present, who carries the bag all the time, even when men come through, they're not capable of completing the task. They can give direction, they can start, they can make it look like they're going to do something, but in the end, this ball is dropped. These women function more like men. So they have not had a choice. They cannot allow themselves to emotionally fall apart while the issue, the crisis, is underway. Those women will appear to be so strong that it's frightening. Then you have the ones who they think they have found daddy, and they think they have found the person that's going to save them, because we're always in a fight or flight mode anyway. So these women that have been looking to this man to be this provider, be like their father, be like all the masculine men that they have encountered, they can't function when it becomes a crisis most times, not independently. And they tend to become overly emotional and fall apart. That's okay if they meet a man who is the man that they imagined he was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's not, it's all effed up, because now you've got a household where the estrogen is so out of control that the man even absorbs it. So now you've got two women who basically can't figure out a solution that does not involve extreme emotions. The arguing, what turns to the fighting, what turns to the slamming of the doors and the leaving and the stuff like that, because they can't work together as a team to find a solution, and independently they don't know how to do it.
And no one knows the elephant in the room.
They know it, but they're just afraid to talk about it. And that's just like you're talking about men crying. I see that so often now. It used to shock the shit out of me when I would see it, because I grew up at a time, my grandfather was a stoic figure. This sucker always had a tie on. He worked at the YMCA. He rode that bus to work. He came home. Grandma packed the lunch. My grandmother changed clothes before my grandfather got home, so it didn't even look like she had been, whatever she was doing all day, she looked like she was ready for him. Granddaddy watched the Cubs. He ate. He went outside and went through his various Playboy magazines, rubbed the car down, came back in, slapped my grandmother on the behind, gave her a kiss, got in the tub, went to bed, and started the day over again.
Watch, rinse, and repeat.
And that's how they function. But then remember, my grandmother could count on the fact that that's the man he was going to be every day. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing in therapy now is a lot of brothers grew up and they just didn't have examples before them. And when you tell people the whole stuff, their maladaptive behaviors develop.
And that's a good segue into my next question. How detrimental or how much weight does childhood trauma play?
I'll take that.
Freud said it, and it's true. A lot of it goes back to the mother. Because if the women are not raised in a healthy environment when they begin to have, there's so much that really needs to be talked about when we're talking about early childhood development and women having children early. It's not so much just that it's, typically your bodies are not mature enough to be ready for it. Emotionally, you're not an adult, really. You're not fully developed until you're 26.
Right, that's the brain.
That's when the brain. So
right?
if you having children at 16, 17, you're definitely not developed. And then it depends on how you had the child. Rape, old man, even though you wanted to do it, it's still rape. What did you experience growing up? What was your mother like? Were you tricked out? Was she tricked out? Were drugs involved? Was this involved? So when you start looking at what kids go through, and I guess my beliefs were too severely middle class when I started doing this, I had no idea that many males had been molested.
And we had that conversation before.
And
I think I asked you, I said, it seems like 75-80%. And you said, no.
Oh, it's higher than that.
But not men and women.
Men and women,
children in general. You said over 90%?
But at the age they are, I mean, I'm talking about kids that are probably 6, boys,
Real
7.
creeps out here.
And some of the most bizarre situations where you have to ask yourself, where was the guardian?
Exactly.
Because in a couple of these scenarios, I have no proof, but the guardian had to know something strange was happening.
How do you not know what your 6-year-old is
So
doing? How do you not know what your?
And
it's the R. Kelly thing. How do these 14-year-old girls disappear for weeks and the parents not know?
And as a parent, if your uncle, not your brother, your uncle came over and said, "I'll double up with your 7-year-old son." And when I couldn't even.
Wow.
I'd have thought they would have been getting a couple of double cheeseburgers because I really wouldn't have considered that. But the stories are not few. They're numerous
and no one
stories.
tells these stories.
Because men have been taught to thug it out. And so the person who's perpetrating this crime, because that's what it is to me, they can count on the fact that most boys were raised the way they were. Don't say anything.
Don't say nothing.
And then if I tell you, well, Uncle John had reached down and had me grab him and I did this and he did that, the parents are not developed enough to deal with it, and they don't want to deal with it because that means the whole family is not going to have to figure out what's going on. So they'll just hope it quiets down after a while. So you get through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is probably when this is going on. Everybody thinks it's 15, 16. No, it's young because it's got to be at a point where you're so impressionable and so weak as an individual that you can't fight back.
But what's the point in talking about it if you're still going to feel the same?
Well, if you don't talk about it, in my experience, you hold it, and what winds up happening is it's something that happened maybe when you were 13 or 14, let's say, but now I see you at 50.
Right.
And you fight everybody. You can't hold a job. And you don't understand why it is. And it's because you've still been dealing with the trauma related to having been raped as a kid.
But you're never gonna forget how it made you feel.
You'll never forget how it made you feel, but you have to learn how to process it in a healthier way, so that you can continue to be a functioning adult.
So there's this movie. It's actually a Tyler Perry movie, a Medea movie, Diary of a Mad Black Woman.
Okay.
So in that movie, one of the women in that movie, she meets a man, and they both have children and stuff like that. She meets him, and he's a really good man, and she has his guard up, throughout the whole movie. And at the end of the movie, it comes to light that the mother let her husband touch on the daughter.
Oh, that's the one.
You seen that movie?
I know what you were talking about. Yes.
And that was such a powerful scene to me when she actually verbally states, "No, you let him touch me. You let him do this to me while you took you and my sister out to the museum, and so he would continue to pay the bills and stuff like that." And it was such a powerful scene when she finally, the man that she with, she tells him, and she lets him know what's going on and why this is happening. She actually overcomes that trauma, and she overcomes it, and she processes that to do better. And I feel like, that kind of answers your question, like, what good is talking about it? It's an amazing thing to talk about it, because once you let it out and you let it out into, it's like a mental release. It's like you can you can start to heal from it.
In my life, we're talking facts. So in my life, my grandparents, my father's parents were both alive, but my mother's father had passed, so it's just that grandmother. They didn't get along. My two sets, let's call them two sets of grandparents. Under normal circumstances, they would not have been in the same room together. But both lived during a time when incest and kids being molested was something that happened in the South before they made it up here. Those three people would agree on who could and who could not babysit us. If you would have asked them to come to dinner together, they would have asked you if you were insane. But if one grandmother called the other one and said, "I can't watch him, they're going out, I can't watch him this week. I don't want him staying with," that would be me, A, B, C, D, or E. My other grandmother, without question, would have dispatched my grandfather to come pick me up from wherever I was. Because you got to remember, these stories, all the stuff I'm saying that happens in therapy, it's not just from this generation. The scars are actually multi-generational. So they may even go back to, them coming out of slavery and how they had to live and how they had to exist.
What about the breeding farms?
So when you talk about not talking about it, first of all, you have to remember probably my age and older, you couldn't talk about it because you just could not. Now that people can talk about it, I'm reaching this generation of people where it was still happening. You got a 40-year-old dude that looks like, he should be a linebacker for something, and telling
Okay.
you every time he went someplace with this particular family member and they would leave him, he knew that what was going to happen, then got upset when the guy stopped doing it. Because it had become so normalized that that's what he thought that visit was supposed to be like.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
Wow. Wow.
That's crazy.
So, wow. That I have no words for that. That's amazing.
And this
So
is
how-
not in any one race. This
Oh, absolutely.
similar story exists in.
So let me ask a question: how do high functioning men, if you're saying over 90% of children experience some kind of inappropriate situation, how do the high functioning men cope and get by and become successful when they're carrying around the same baggage that a guy that can't keep a job is carrying?
When you look at some of the guys that you consider to be highly functioning, you'd have to know what they're like when you're not around them. Because that's how they cope.
Was it like the Will Smith reaching out, slapping somebody when you thought he had it all together?
We don't know what triggered him. I mean,
Yeah.
for real. We
Yeah.
can talk about what the TV programs say, but we don't know what triggered him.
Yeah.
Even when you talk about someone like an R. Kelly, you're talking about someone who, again, was probably molested from a very early
his
age.
sister and,
Right.
the landlord.
So when you're looking at that and you get him, and we went to the same high school, and you get him to this point where he's now an adult, you're looking at, well, who did he talk to? Who helped him? How many times had he been basically instructed not to talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
Then he develops a talent that people want to capitalize on. So he sees it as his way out, but he hasn't processed why all this other stuff was happening.
Right.
So the saga continues. He goes on to do
people hurting people.
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like the first step in that would be like, firstly, you got to be able to process everything that happened, and then you have to I would say forgiveness is a big thing. Like, I feel like forgiveness and releasing that is a really big thing. It's like, let's just say like something did happen to you when you was younger, or it's just any situation like that. I feel like you would have to find like forgiveness. Like you would have to say, okay, this happened. Like, you have to show a level of forgiveness, and I wouldn't say understanding because that's totally inexcusable. I would just say forgiveness, so you yourself ain't holding it in and you can move past it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I would say that you always have to remember the problem, the struggle with that is academically that sounds like it's doable, but then you have to remember that most people who deal with, and we'll call some of these things, those are extreme instances, but let's just say that it's a kid who watched his father walk out on his parents. So maybe there was nothing that the kid could really put his finger on why it happened, but this happened. The trauma is recorded. So even when you say, because you never forget, and you do need to forgive, but you never forget. But since we record everything, kids start recording from the time that sensorily they can pick things up. It's like a cassette recorder. You never know what's going to happen in your life that's going to press the button play. So even though you have tried to forgive it, let's say, going back to a child being molested, let's say I was molested as a kid and I had children. And then we went to a family reunion, no big deal. I saw my child playing with either that relative or someone who looked similar to that relative. I might not even be thinking about it. I may have compartmentalized it for the most part so that I can be highly functioning.
And it comes back
And
and
that
everything
button
erupts.
is pressed. Mm-hmm. And then, it's really difficult. That's why sometimes when in therapy, I find the talking is not so much so that they can talk, but the talking is so that they can find a way to manage the feelings when they begin to erupt.
Yeah. I understand that whole cassette. Like, I understand what you're saying about the whole cassette player reference.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of have a different view on that. Like, I don't believe that pushing things into the back of your mind is really helpful, because then you have situations like that. You have situations
Right.
where it can trigger you, and now you just snap, and now you a totally different person, and now nobody understands why you changed, like, why you had that reaction, you know? So it's like, I feel like, and you see this a lot with, like you said, people that molested. You see it a lot with veterans who've seen war. You've seen it a lot, yeah. Like
police officers, firemen.
Yeah, it's like you see it a lot with people who have been through these traumatic things. And I feel like, me personally, like, if you can find the strength to do it, I feel like I wouldn't say have it on the forefront of your mind, but have it in your heart. Like, and what I mean by that is have it as something that is there. It's always going to be there, accept the fact that it's always going to be there, but use that as motivation for something better. Because I feel like it's two type of people in this world. I feel like it's the type of people who go through those negative things and they repeat that cycle, or it's people who go through those negative things and they change and they try to break that spoke. They try to break that wheel of that curse, that specific curse, whether it's a generational curse, whether it's anything. You know, it's like that's kind of just what I feel personally. Like just have it close to you. So when something does, like, let's just say something does pop up like that, where I see my child playing with the person who hurt me, I'm not gonna react and go try to hurt him or harm him. I'm gonna, like, deal with that in a more, you know, just a calmer way.
I think that's an ideal. I think if you can do that, that would be the best way to handle it. But I think,
wouldn't it be best just to cut that person out of
you didn't even know they were going to be there.
Sometimes
right,
you
don't even know.
Well, my mom would have did was told me not to be around them.
What anybody would do is choose not to be around.
But I mean, like, she would have said, "Hey, like, this person did X, Y, and Z." Like, she always never sugarcoated anything.
She just told you straight out.
Yeah. She would just
watch him.
She would just tell me, "Hey, like, he's a pedophile. Don't hang around him."
Right.
You know, like, or I don't want you around your uncles because they gangbang. Or, you know, because he be selling dope and I don't want you even thinking about it.
But that's a
rare thing.
That's rare.
That is so rare. Like I love your mother at this point because that's not something that happens 99% of the time.
You're right.
My
You're
mom
absolutely
like
right.
that.
Really? See, y'all lucky then. Y'all lucky because there's a lot of.
Well, you're 19, so it's like, you know, your mom's from a different generation, probably.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's true because, like
You know, and
I hear you, bro.
complacency. First off, complacency. I grew up in a what goes on in this house stays in this house kind of thing, you know, and I feel like that is one of the absolutely most terrible ideas. Whoever created that, I promise you, you are like one of the worst people ever. And I say that because you have to be able to express some stuff, you know, like
some of the negativity.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's something good, it's a big difference between being private and covering up the family
covering
dirt.
up some stuff
Yeah.
like
Dirt.
it is.
But they were
dirt.
lucky because in our culture, it is more common that even if it's the worst thing, it's not to be discussed outside of the house.
Yeah, how much has that changed? What? Because you're 33. Okay, 33, 19. How were you guys raised with, when you said your mom would just flat out tell you?
I really don't know how old my mom is, but she was from Robert Taylor.
Okay.
So, like, you know, like.
She gonna tell you how it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just get whatever that come with. My grandmother, she's from, like, Mississippi and something like that. But it's like, you just
So
take
you
it
have
how
more of
you
an
get.
old school.
Yeah, exactly.
upbringing.
I'm right along with you guys. Like,
Okay.
you know,
And
essentially.
it sounded like your house was kind of doing the same thing for a different reason.
I mean, I have more so, how do I word this? A mother who cares more about imagery, how she is perceived, and
That's common.
That's
common.
Yeah,
That's
like
common.
how she is perceived versus like actually trying to solve something, or actually trying to have something of substance. You know, like it's not like a fake it till you make it kind of thing. It's all going to be fake. Instead of actually trying to cultivate and create something real, or like trying to actually deal with real problems, I'm just going to show you and everybody else that nothing is wrong and everything is okay when there's a obviously glaring problem. Like, let's just say, like, I went through a situation like that. Like, it would never be talked about ever, like, in life. Why? Because then that opens, am I going to be seen as a bad parent, or, you know, it's just stuff like that. So it's like, it's just that would have been my situation.
That is typically the way that it is, because to have as many clients as I see, and whether it's molesting or whatever it is, the reason that they have come is because they can't carry it any longer. and they've been trying to carry it in a version of silence to the point where they can't have healthy relationships, any other kind of healthy relationship. They don't have healthy relationships with their kids. They don't have healthy relationships with their partners. They can't. They claim their occupation is either too difficult or too something, but it's because they can't have. They just cannot have a healthy relationship because of the trauma that they're still trying to manage.
Do more people come to you out of desperation than coming to you with saying, you know what, I need some help? Are they, they come to you like, I've run out of ways to mask and cope with this, so let me give me another outlet, or versus people coming to you genuinely wanting to just get better?
So it depends. A lot of it has to depend on the socioeconomic level that they came from. So if we're looking at more affluent African Americans, they're coming because they just want to make sure the little things that they're noticing don't get out of control.
Don't affect their money.
Well, no, because they're typically more, they have the luxury of knowing. See, a lot of things about our mental health that we squash is based on what we feel we have the luxury to do.
Okay.
And if you're looking at black people who are of a certain economic setting, they know that if, like, they're struggling, they're constantly arguing with one of their children, or they're noticing that there's constant disagreements in the house, and this has just started. A great example was I had an African-American doctor during COVID, and he would come home and he would just yell at everybody. So when we would have the session, it was usually right after he had been home for an hour. What we started doing was I would have him go outside when he first got home, and we would have the session over the phone outside, and I'd have him scream at the cars going down the street.
Oh, instead of
screaming at everybody else. And so finally he realized that, a lot of what he was dealing with was fear, because he was an emergency room doctor. He had just been to the hospital watching people die from COVID, needing to thug out and thug through those experiences. And then he had to get home, and he even said, I opened the door, making sure everybody's still okay before I start. So that means the real reason he was yelling was truly because he was so happy to see that they were okay, but he didn't know how to say that.
Oh, so he literally came in the door saying, "Everybody good? Everybody all right?
No, he
You
said
straight?"
he would look,
and then he would kick it in.
No, he didn't even say he would say anything. He would just look. He would want to know where his son was, his daughters were, what his wife was doing.
Wow.
And he said it was even times because the housekeeper they had was older, and he said he would be so stressed because she was riding the bus. So, a lot of it is, how are we managing ourselves? And are we really confronting people with the stuff that belongs to them? So we started our sessions outside. He would yell. Finally, we started talking more about his day at the hospital. So once he finished that, and about 7:30, he could calm down. Then when he got in, it started getting better. But a lot of what we go through is more because we don't know how to process it. We carry it too long. I wish if I could say one thing, find a friend, a therapist, a brother, a sister that you can call on the phone in the car for 5 or 10 minutes when you're just not feeling right, and let them hear you. And you two need to be close enough where they can tell you, okay, this is just some normal stuff he's going through. Right. Or say, hey, why don't you find somebody to talk to, because this sounds like this is a little bit more than I thought it was going to be.
And from that, what can we do as men when we receive that call? How can we be a better friend to help our friend through that?
The key is listening, comprehending, communicating. That's first. And then make sure you keep the lines of communication open. You're not your brother's keeper, but you do, I do believe we're all put here to make sure that we don't do any harm. So when you listen to your brother on the phone and he sounds a little distressed, let him get home after you get off the phone and follow up with a phone call. If he does not answer the phone, do not feel it's out, if you can do it, if it's out of place for you to drive over and make sure he is okay. Because what tends to happens, like you said, in those dark places where something has triggered you and you spiral down into this depression and you can't get out of it. Then you're only trapped up here. And there's really nobody in there to help you but you. So I believe that's why you don't really need more than 2 or 3 friends, because to be that intimate with another person, you need the time. And if you got 10, 20 friends, you can't do that.
You can't invest enough time.
But if you have a good friend, and you haven't heard from them in a while,
check on them.
even if you just text them to say, hey, what's up? And then if they don't respond, you figure out what should be your next move.
Yeah. That's why I'm sure almost everyone here knows that I'll hit you with a "you good."
Yeah.
I send that text out all the time.
Yeah.
Doug, what has been your experience receiving that call and making someone feel better, or you having to make that call and being able to talk to somebody close to you has made you feel better?
Um,
I mean, you don't have to go into detail to exactly what it is, but I mean,
Right.
have you had that experience?
Well, when I mentioned earlier about being in that dark place, and the 3 friends I got, I called all 3 of them. Didn't reach none of them. I had never mentally been, I guess, that depressed in my life. And for whatever reason, I ended up calling one of my cousins, first cousin. I called her up, and she knew something was wrong immediately before I even started really talking to her. Because, I mean, even though we're close,
Y'all don't talk like that.
we don't talk like
Right.
that.
Right.
So when I called her, first thing she said was, Douglas was wrong. Then I just spilled the beans, you know. And I felt so much better after that conversation. I wasn't at the point where I would have done something to myself, but it was bad. I'll just put it that way. It was,
You didn't know which way to go.
Yeah, it was bad.
Have you ever received a call and was someone else's lifeline?
Yeah. One of my 3 friends, is going through some stuff with his fiance, and it hurt listening to his hurt, but I knew at that point I can't. I got to be stable and somebody he can lean on and vent to. Even though what he was telling me made me feel a certain way emotionally, because that's my dude. And after that conversation, he felt better. I felt good that he felt better, because it was, I mentioned a grown man crying. I mean, I'm on the phone with him, he bawling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn,
Right.
And it meant a lot to me to be able to be there for him, and I hope all men, especially black men, I hope all of us have that
Right.
somebody we can lean on.
Yep.
Because some of us may not have the funds or the benefits or whatever to seek a professional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to have that close individual you can lean on, that's priceless.
And see, in our community, I'll say this is my experience. You used to be able to go and you could talk to your pastor, priest, people in the church. You could. You could flow through there, and after church, pull them to the side and talk to them. But the church people got to be, in some cases, too difficult to access. And that accessibility, also that lack of accessibility, was an area also where in our community a lot of therapy was received. It was faith-based. It offered you hope. And now many of us can't get to that person to give it to us. So the hopelessness takes over. And that's why, like you said, even if it's not official therapy or something like that, you need to have a person that you can commit to take their calls, and they will take yours.
Sean, what's been your experience? Have you ever had that call, or have you ever had to make that call?
Multiple times, for both. Regarding having
19, man. Where you going, man? Who you hanging with?
It's a hard knock life, bro. Hard knock life. Yeah, though, multiple times, receiving that call. I'm very close to my older sister. And, we both suffered from not having our biological father. So a couple of times I was, lifeline. Whenever she's going through something, I try my absolute hardest to be there and pick up the phone whenever. So I would say that's somebody who, we both confide in each other regarding, like being the one calling. Yeah, a couple times. My early teenage years were really hard for me, just dealing with a lot of home stuff, So, and I didn't really have like an outlet. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have an outlet at all. I didn't really have people who I knew who I can talk to because I was in like middle school, high school, and the kids. I really, no one's really mature enough to be able to deal with stuff like that. And I kind of felt like I was the only one going through that. So, and, pretty recently as well, like I mentioned, like I cut a lot of people off in my life, and that was pretty hard for me. So it wasn't as hard as my earlier years because I feel like I've grown mentally but I started going to church. You mentioned faith, so I started going to church, and that's been helping me out a lot. And just trying to keep moving forward as well. Like, I try my hardest to not let my emotions get the best of me, but also accept that I do have the emotions.
Yes.
So you have to. I feel like you have to find that balance because you can't be so emotional to the point where you can't function, but you also can't be so functioning to the point where you're just a robot because now you're really just holding it in. So you gotta find that really sharp balance.
Do you mind? How did you reach the point at 19 where you knew that there were people that you needed to disassociate yourself from?
I reached that point because, I always felt like I was really kind of different than a lot of other people. You know what I mean? It's like you see other things people relate to and you don't really care for real. Like, you don't really care for that certain type of stuff. Like, I don't smoke. I've never smoked a day in my life, actually. I don't drink really. It's just certain things that I do that was just kind of like just how I was like born. Really, it was just I didn't really.
You're 19. You shouldn't be drinking anyway. But please continue.
That's what I was.
Yeah. So like it's just I just never really partook in stuff like that. And I never really had to like I lived in like Chicago and stuff like I never really cared for like fancy clothes for real and stuff. I was just really I just wasn't that really type of person. So
Give
when
it time. It'll kick in. Nice things will start appealing to you, I promise.
Yeah. So when I just found myself in the same environment, and when you feel like you've outgrown your environment, it's time for a change. When you don't even want to be in the environment that you're in for any duration of time. Like, I found myself, like, especially once I became a tradesman and everything, and I started having more responsibility, and I started, having to go to sleep later and waking up. I have a job, and I started really trying to get into real estate and stuff like that. It's like when I just had those certain passions that I saw that nobody else around me had, like I'm trying to talk to you about Roth IRAs, 401ks, stocks and stuff like that. You trying to tell me about this, this weed you finna go grab, or you trying to talk about it's just the conversation stopped adding up after a certain amount of time, and I was like, you know what? It's bringing me down hearing this. Yeah. Because now, it was just bringing me down a lot. So it was really time for a change.
And you're going to find, especially as you get older, from where you're starting from, in your mind, and it sounds kind of not friendly, but it really is. Your friends should always be doing something,
your circle.
If you are, and you need to be more of like minds, so that as you grow, think of yourself and your friends as a corporation. You're all growing together, and you'll find that there'll be a lot less crap if you jettison that dead weight now, and you start making sure that hey, so and so is a nurse doing this, doing that, doing the other. We go to the same church. We enjoy going to Buffalo Wild Wings every so. These kinds of things sound so simple,
But it's peace.
But it
It's
really is.
sincere.
And,
You can
and doesn't that
control.
help when you have a friend that you want to confide in and help you get through their things? Isn't it nice to have somebody that's kind of moving in the same direction as you are?
Yes.
Because they're
Because-
able to, they're
Because they can understand the street. If you hang with other entrepreneurs, they can understand the
Relate-
sacrifices and stress.
relatability is one of the most important things as a man, because we don't feel related to at all
No.
in a lot of different sense. You know, like especially like in our relationships, you don't really feel related to. How can you understand me having to pay all the bills and me being stressed out about that when you looking at me to take care of you? It don't work out. So I feel like relatability is really important, and try to, like you said, trying to find like-minded individuals.
Yes.
Like I found that God put certain people in my life that once I cut everybody off, you see how it's supposed to be. Like when I met Chris right here, and you kind of just see how it's supposed to be.
Right.
Like, hey, I can call Chris anytime about any idea that I have. I was just doing that a couple of days ago. We're gonna have a hour, 2 hour conversation about it, and he go tell me about what he's trying to do, and that's how it's supposed to be. You don't. Chris ain't talking about drugs. Chris ain't talking about
Well, not to you anyway.
facts, just the facts. But it's like it's just certain. It's just you reach a different level, and you have that epiphany of, well, dang, this is how it's supposed to be the whole time.
Right.
Right.
It feels
Should-
different.
It feels different.
Right.
A relationship shouldn't be emotionally that difficult. Things happen.
Should
so
be
of
easy.
course, things will happen. So the unexpected is going to pop up, but the unexpected should not be the routine. So when you start looking at people, and that's why I ask this, because as you get older, there will be people you will have to, I hate to say it again, but jettison.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to say, you know what, we're just not moving in the same direction, and it's not the feeling I want.
It's like I shouldn't be tired talking to you. I shouldn't have like a critical, like a red flag in my head every time we conversate, every time you text me. If I feel that way, we don't need to talk. It should be peace.
And you shouldn't have dread. You know,
Yeah,
sometimes you will have
Right.
people that when you see their phone number,
Oh my God, he about to ask me for some money.
Oh no, he's just gonna stress me out
He
with his
about to stress me out.
negativity.
He about to call me. Yeah.
But okay, kid,
Yes, sir.
making that phone call, receiving that phone call.
I've done both. The time when I needed it, it kind of came in different forms. Like to Sean's point of like certain friends aren't as like they don't know how to express themselves the same way that others do. And so like I have one friend who smokes a lot, and he's just like, hey man, like come smoke. Like come outside.
Whatever's going on, just come smoke.
Yeah,
this.
yeah. But
Yeah.
then we talk. Like that's
Okay.
when the therapeutic part of it like kind
Okay.
of began. So it's like to your point of like just kind of talking about it, feel like just saying something and kind of getting some type of reciprocation from it is kind of like what that did. And then like my best friend, who to your point is somebody who I wasn't really talking to, but like we were locked in. And then like we both kept the same number since like I still got my same phone number, like So I just called him. I'm like, oh man, you still got the same number. So we kind of like just clicked, like it ain't no time was lost, And like it was just like, hey, what's going on? Like what you doing? And then like this is the time before I was iron working, so I was super stressed out. It's really I was with the wrong lady, like that'll do it, just being with the wrong woman.
Yes, sir.
Like, but I was in the love thing. I ain't realized I was the wrong woman. So it's like, like just talking to him and then just kind of getting back to where we kind of fell off at. We were like kind of like really ambitious, like, like adolescents. So it was just like, hey, like what are you up to? What are you doing? What are you doing? We was in Bitcoin. We was in a whole bunch of stuff. Like we haven't been talking, but it's like, yo, we're still like super relatable with one another. So we just kind of like just turned that back on. And then he kind of mentioned something that kind of got me out of my depression with my lady. It was like something that happened in high school. But I had forgotten about it. But then he mentioned it, and it was like, oh, man, like that happened. I remember that. And then I was able to make my decision based off of something that happened like years ago, like decades ago.
He snapped you out of the funk and got you back
absolutely,
to on your square.
Because it's like, oh, yeah, like this is why you were in that situation. I kind of got into an accident, and then she was the only one there, so I just forgot about everything. But it was like, like as soon as he said it, I was like, oh, man, like this is why I'm off track, because I made a decision a long time ago, but I forgot that I made a decision, and once I kind of fixed that, like what really triggered that is I went to my mom, but I didn't really go to her, so to speak. I just moved back in with her. So it's like family kind of like brought me back to realizing who I was as an individual. So my uncle started coming around. He's like singing to my kids. Like that's kind of like the reason why I'm in music. Just like little things, like like little nuances that were there. And it's like that really like shaped me as a person. Like, oh, that's why I do music. Oh, that's why I do this. So like it just retaught me things.
Remind you
again.
where you came from.
Yeah, absolutely. You
Okay.
know, and sometimes that's what we need. Because we out in the world, like when we venturing off, when we like 20 something or whatever. But then like we forget exactly like how we grew up. Like what was fun. Like what we enjoyed at like 12, at 8. You know what I'm saying? Like things
come
that
back
really,
home.
Yeah. So I went back home and that did that. And then when I helped somebody, I help a lot of people. So I can't really pinpoint, but it's usually like I just listen. Like
Right. And usually in my experience, I've received that call and I didn't realize the good that I did until later when they go, man, I was going through something.
Right.
And that time I talked to you.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, I'm glad I was there. I don't know what I said.
Yeah,
But the fact that
absolutely.
I answered the phone, and I feel that I'm genuine. I'm always going to be genuine.
Absolutely.
So, words can always help.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're going to wrap this up.
sure.
Doug, you got some final words? Just on men's mental health, what we can do to be better and help each other through it.
I think we need to take men's mental health a lot more serious. My younger brother, he's a environmental health and safety officer for AT&T, and he's been championing that cause, men's mental health, because men do suffer in silence, and we need to promote an environment where it's okay to release and to be vulnerable, and you're not weak to talk about what's bothering you, and it's okay to reach out to therapists. I know that's been a taboo. Matter of fact, when I was in the military, I had a top secret clearance, and it was a pro-con type thing because there were things I did in my job that bothered me, but if I go see the therapist, I'll lose my clearance because it's like, okay, you're not stable. So,
Wow. So they didn't even have therapists that were authorized to help you out with.
I mean,
wow.
they did, but it was kind of like, should I do that type? You know what I'm saying?
You get better mentally, but it hurts your job.
Right.
Wow.
So I mean, in at the end of the day, like I said, we got to make it, we got to normalize it so that men feel comfortable seeking help when something's bothering them. It's got to be normalized, in my opinion.
Okay. Final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, I really do feel like, especially with my generation, we got to get better at talking to each other. What I mean by that is like if somebody brings something up to you, don't laugh or, don't call them anything or just listen. Just take the time to listen because you might be going through the same thing and you don't even know it. Y'all two might be able to relate to each other more than y'all ever thought y'all could if y'all just had that conversation. If y'all just opened the door to further conversation versus just, what girls y'all like, a sports or anything like that. If you open that conversation to more, you can find similarities with anybody and you can relate and y'all can both work through y'all problems. So to my generation, let's just talk to each other more.
Okay. Ken?
I say if you should have some serenity. So it's like if you can't change something, like if it's something that you just can't change, then you shouldn't be like dwelling on it, and like the things that you can change, then you kind of actively pursue those those solutions, I guess. My mom, she had one hand, she got hurt in the 90s, but so all my life it's been just totally odd.
So she's been one-hand iron worker?
Yeah, well, she was. She had both her hands. She had a mag drill, and then somebody plugged it in, and it took her hand. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
But I was probably 1 or 2 or something like that.
Okay.
But ever since then, I'd known that I had to step up. Some things that I can't change. You know what I'm saying?
Raw, bro.
Oh yeah, she a gangster, bro.
That's a trooper.
But it's pros and cons of that because I could never talk to her because she was just, to your point, like a man. She didn't want to talk. It was
hard. Yeah, that was my mother. Hard.
Yeah, like
Hard.
it's like, but
Yeah.
but I love her. You know,
Right.
I love everything about my mom. You know, it's just like, man, I just can never really talk to you until now, till like I'm 33, and you know, you kind of just looking at your last whatever years of your life. Now you're just trying to, you know, kind of get close to me, but it's like I needed that when I was like, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, but
Right.
yeah,
But
I
you
was,
understand how hard her situation
yeah, absolutely.
was. Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Absolutely. Like, and to your point of being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, having the empathy, you know, like you definitely got to do that. But if you can't control it, like don't even dwell on it. Just kind of like focus on things you can change, and you know, make those adjustments.
Okay. Doctor, no, I'm not gonna call you Doctor.
No,
Phil.
please.
No, I'm sorry. It's the first thing that came to my
don't
mind,
even
and,
say
and
it
while I'm
because
thinking it,
of
I'm
that
like,
half the
no,
time.
it's not what I want to say. Phil.
So I will say, your mother, you know, when you add the point that she had lost her hand
Yeah.
early on, you know, there was a version of tough love that your mother had to start off with.
Oh yeah, it went down.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
she did not have the capacity all the time to kind of spoon feed people.
Right.
You know, she was going through her own thing still.
Right.
I mean,
No time for that.
You're a woman working a job and you've lost your hand.
That's a bunch of shit.
It's rough.
Mhm.
So you were dealt, you know, a spoon that had quite a bit of salt in it, not as much sugar.
Mm-hmm.
It feels rough,
And that's a good way to say it.
but that was the only way she knew how to do it.
Yeah, how to power through it.
And I think for black men, if I could say anything, is to check on yourself once a year at least. You know, when you go for your physical, I hope everybody goes for their physical. Just like you think of high blood pressure, that's a silent killer. Mental illness is one too.
Yes, sir.
So always remember, the person that's mentally ill, you really can't tell because they've been wearing the mask so long, it looks right.
And most
Sure.
people do it. So looking normal, looking like everybody else,
Yeah.
everybody's running around looking crazy.
Everybody looks
Nah,
fine.
that mask
Dope
on.
talk, man.
Okay. Well, there's the episode. I want to thank all of you for spending some time with us. Please comment, like, subscribe, and give your experiences in the comment section. What have you dealt with? What do you think of these gentlemen's experience? What can you relate to? What can't you relate to? What would you like to see? If anybody want to get in touch with Phil and speak with a professional, Phil, how do they find you?
So I can be found under Dr. Philip Montgomery on ZocDoc, which is the way that you would make an appointment to see me.
Okay. All right. I want to thank everybody for coming. Put a glass up.
Thank you.
Put a glass up, everybody. I want to thank Uncle Nearest, our sponsor. I want to thank everybody for participating in this, and hopefully we will all walk away a little bit better and a little bit more conscious of what's going on in the world. Salute, everybody.
Salute.
Tune in next time.
That's that last drop I had.
I was holding.
That's good talk. That's good talk, fellas.